Welcome to another episode of Bridges, where we help build a bridge, that one right there between marketing and finance. And look over there across the bridge, it's a real live CFO. Today, we have an interview with fractional CFO Mark Lupton of Greenhouse Advisors. I work closely with him on our client Carnivore Snacks. He has an invested interest in bringing these two worlds together. We're going to talk about how marketing and finance can practically collaborate in building a financial plan to help you achieve your business objective. As always, we're brought to you by WayFlyer and FinalLoop, and Mark's a user. Mark is a customer of FinalLoop. You're going to really enjoy this one. We get practical. We're building you an organizational plan. Enjoy. All right, we're here. Another episode of Bridges, and it's not just me this time. Not just me in a spreadsheet, not just me in a PowerPoint. I took my beard off and I gave it to this gentleman here. But this is Mark Lupton. He is the founder and fractional CFO at Greenhouse, and also somebody I get the opportunity to work with. We have a shared customer in Carnivore Snacks, who you may have heard me interview Mark, the founder, on our podcast this week. But Mark and I have been chopping it up a bunch just in our free time each week because we got so much of it together. We just get on and we have a shared passion for trying to bridge the worlds of marketing and finance. And you've heard a lot from me in this series, the marketer, my view of the world. It might be a little myopic, I admit to being a little singular. So I wanted to bring in the other side. And I wanted to ask them, why have you guys been screwing it up? No, just kidding. Not really. But why? What I wanted to do was be able to have a collaborative conversation. So much of my work on Twitter, a lot of times I get accused of being maybe a little dogmatic in my headlines or singular. And a lot of what I'm trying to do is really just move the Overton window a little. Just go from thinking that marketing should have no role in finance to maybe they do deserve a role, even if they aren't in total control, like maybe I'm representing. So this is going to be the nuanced version of a conversation that started on Twitter about who owns the forecast and how do you build a great financial plan. So we're going to go through that in some cool ways today. You should stick around. But Mark, first, who are you and why should people listen to you?
Yeah, Taylor, thanks for having me. I'm Mark Lupton, fractional CFO, like you said. I've been working with e-commerce businesses who are on their way to the 8 figures in mind, helping them sort out their financial systems and ultimately get peace of mind about their finances, get proactive, and actually hit their goals, which is something that we see a lot of people falling short of because of a lack of systems and because of a lack of this bridge we've been talking about.
So we get the chance to just sort of be like foreigners, inviting each other into each other's homes and experiencing the cultural differences between finance and marketing. And in that conversation, I think we're finding so much shared ground. And that's what I'm excited to discuss today, is the shared ground that we're finding, and to help figure out why is it so hard to build a cohesive financial plan that everybody in the company understands and to go out and execute it, especially in e-commerce. And it's because there's a lot of parts. And so today we're going to start with a diagram that Mark shared with me that he built about his view of what goes into building a financial plan. I realize that there is no one department that's responsible for it. It is a truly collaborative effort. And I think he has a great framework for looking at this that we're going to start the conversation by looking at together today. He's going to walk us through. And then we're going to dialogue about some of the ways that we can build on top of the infrastructure that he already has to present what hopefully, and maybe someday soon, would be a collaborative presentation from the two of us about the ultimate, Bridges official financial plan. But Mark, why don't you share your screen and talk a little bit about what you've built? And again, this is fun because we're doing this in practice with the customer as we're trying to figure out, okay, how do CTC and the CFO work together to build a financial plan? But take us through what you have here and what we're looking at.
Yeah, sure thing. So for a second, ignore the boxes and arrows and look over here at these 3 simple words: reporting, departments, overall plans. This is the general flow. We want to have our reporting foundation set. We want to then roll that into our department plans so that our plans are based in reality. And then we want all of those department plans to roll up into overall plans. And so now we can go over to the boxes. Looking at the boxes here, you see in the bottom left corner, we've got marketing reporting. And on the bottom line, you have different departmental types of reporting. Now, Taylor's mentioned to me before that oftentimes reporting in silos and it shouldn't be. And so the way the finance guy thinks about it is that ultimately isn't, because it's all seen in the financials. And so it all rolls up to the financial plan, and that plan gets compared to our financial reports. So let's walk through this. Marketing reporting.
Can I, there's something that you said there that just triggered for me, that it is intuitive and obvious to you as the fractional CFO that there is a financial plan that exists. And of course, you know what it is. And I think that's one of the spots where I go, that probably isn't obvious to everyone, like in a way that there is a place where this all comes together cohesively. And I think that's one of the things that I'm just saying, like, wait, we might not know that actually. It's obvious to you, but we may not realize that,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah, the financial plan, this happens one way or another. It doesn't necessarily happen on paper and in a system, but even for a business owner who has no real planning process, this is sort of happening in the background. And so you are making an assessment of, will this work out for the bottom line? Now, it might not be effective. And that's kind of what this process is meant to do here in front of you. It's meant to show and put actually a visualization to what an effective process is. So I'm going to keep walking through this. Marketing reporting, it feeds the marketing plan and the capacity plan and our production and warehouse KPIs. Those KPIs will differ if you make your own product or you have a co-packer or co-manufacturer. And then your team feedback and reviews, that feeds your R&D and G&A plan and your people plan. And then your financial reporting, of course, is going into your financial plan. So as you can see here, there's a left to right flow. This left to right flow has a sort of loop to it, as Taylor's called out. But this left to right flow, in my take, starts with marketing. The marketing and demand ultimately needs to be fed by your ability to deliver. And that ability to deliver is your capacity. Capacity is not your mental capacity, it's the production capacity. And so we have this production capacity. And if we have a manufacturing facility, that means a lot more. We have to buy equipment, et cetera. But if you are outsourcing that production, then you need to be aware of what your supplier is able to supply. And then from there,
would it be fair to say that there could also be sort of a reverse, maybe make it a dotted line between any of these boxes in the original plan, which is to say that if there's a constraint or a limitation discovered, it kicks it back the other way in a way that's not always going to occur, but may occur, that there's a constraint potentially in capacity for the marketing plan.
Yes. So the idea of bottlenecks is kind of what I'm reminded of when you're talking about this, and that a business's growth is ultimately alleviating bottlenecks that are preventing the next phase of growth. And so if you are talking about a bottleneck driven way of doing planning, then you focus first on the bottleneck and work everything downward from that position. So I think that it is fair to say that there's some dotted lines and iterations here. Now, this is all a cycle. And so it all informs, everything is informed by the other pieces. It's not necessarily a black and white fully, but there are separate components. And so if your marketing and your demand is your bottleneck, then you do want to start with that plan and then work your way down. So marketing plan sets the capacity sets your inventory plan. So if you don't know your capacity, you don't know your production schedules, your ordering, et cetera. And then G&A, what's in support it, what people support this full operation. And then that all rolls up into financial plan. And Taylor, back to your point about the dotted line and the communication from, capacity to marketing to inventory to marketing. That's what these double arrows are for. It all rolls up into the financial plan and then it comes right back down. Because is it feasible? Is it tenable? Is it actually realistic?
Or another one of your favorites, is it what the person wants? Right?
Is it what the person wants?
Yeah, because I think that's another part of this. We like to say it's the difference between our job is to represent what's likely to occur, and their job is to tell us what they would like to occur. And we have to bring those things into alignment, right?
That's right. And so I'm going to scroll down here a bit because there's more detail on this and exactly what you're talking about. Owner goals. If you're a business owner, your goals are driving the business, whether you acknowledge that or not. That may sound obvious, but your personal goals and what you personally want to gain from the business financially is driving the strategy. And it's absolutely imperative that you align that consciously as opposed to trying to separate what is truly inextricable. They're completely connected and they need to be addressed as such and incorporated into a financial plan. So just like you said, everything rolls up into the financial plan, and the financial plan points towards the owner goals and also provides feasibility. Is this realistic? And then these double arrows, it's feedback loops. So if the inventory plan has a certain financial outcome that impacts our ability to market, then can we revisit marketing? That can apply to any of these different boxes.
So I love this. So my statement on Twitter and the debate that I sort of started was this idea of who owns the forecast. So
Yeah.
my question is for you, and
Mhm.
I have an answer and I'm curious what yours is. Who decides this is complete?
Well, the owner does. The owner decides it's complete. Every single person has a role to play in this. And ultimately, though, the owner decides, does this point me in the direction of the overall strategy and my overall goals? And is this feasible? The CFO can provide feasibility, can provide how realistic that might be. And so should every single department here. But ultimately, the owner is the one who owns it.
So I think this is so right. And this is actually, there's an important part of governance structure that plays into this process where I believe that the ultimate authority to decide that this is the final version is the person responsible. And in some cases, if that's a wholly owned subsidiary where one individual person owns the entire cap table and there's no board, that person is responsible. But like CTC as an example, we have an external board that I have to get my annual budget approved by that group of people. They have to vote on a majority basis to say this is the budget for the year. And I would contend, not for the sake of deferral of responsibility, I'm interested in being 100% responsible for that outcome, that in the process of voting, they declare their responsibility for that, the likelihood of that event occurring. And the cascade of responsibility has to flow from there. And that's something to think about if you're a board member, if you're a CEO, wherever you are, when you vote yes, you declare responsibility for that, the viability of that outcome.
You mentioned deferring responsibility. As a CFO, I've seen owners who seem allergic to this process. And I understand why. I look at all the boxes, right? It's a lot. It doesn't have to be a lot. We'll talk more about that later. But I see people often defer responsibility to the CFO or defer responsibility to their outsourced agency and not take ownership. And that is a really quick way to not achieve your goals. If you're not owning your own goals as an owner and your own plan to get there, then you will not achieve your goals. So if you're not owning the plan, then you're not going to realize the goals.
And this is, I think, probably what started this whole series for me was watching marketers be victim to a forecast and say that they were given an unrealistic expectation.
Right.
And I would just simply say, marketer, no, you are responsible for the expectation. And it is actually your job to educate and use data to build a case and inform if the forecast is inaccurate. So that's a skill that you have to develop, right? But when you start down the path, you are now complicit. And that is it. There's no putting your hands up and saying, well, it wasn't fair. None of that. When you accept the forecast and you begin the work on day one, it is now, we don't miss. We go execute against that plan. And my time for saying that I don't believe in it has passed. And I watch, sometimes it is very intimidating. Like I work with partners that there's a big, fancy CEO and a board, maybe they're even in a public company and they're like, I can't change that opinion. And it's like, no, you can. The question is, how would you? What would need to be true if you could? And I think this is a relational political dynamic. It's about having the data and information to build compelling cases. It's about understanding the language of the recipient. But all along the way, everybody is responsible is really the answer. But the authoritative accountability lies with the person making the decision about this is it or not.
Absolutely. I want to add one piece to that. I often say that the financial analysis is only half the CFO's job. The other half is communicating. And that communication is absolutely vital here. It's the same with a marketer, though. To bridge the gap, shameless CTC plug, our shared work with Carnivore Snacks has empowered the planning process significantly because they're optimizing using contribution margin, going further down the P&L, and they're not afraid to do it. And in fact, they're taking ownership of it. Not ownership necessarily of what the margin is, but the plan that comes from that margin and the reporting that generates, the margin that we report to them. So I love that integration. I think that's a huge practice that you guys put into place to enable people to achieve their goals so that you can have confidence in that plan and not be a victim of the forecast.
And this is where, again, we made the joke in the beginning about languages and culture. This is about assimilation to somebody else's culture. And if you're a marketer, I'm just telling you right now, if you keep showing reports with ROAS and CTR and CPM and expecting CFOs to use them to action against, you are missing a big opportunity to care about the language of your counterpart and learn to communicate with them in a way that will make the most sense. If you depend on, just imagine you're having a conversation and someone's using Google Translate in the background and how much nuance will be missed in that process, right? So it's on you. Become fluent in their language. And that's what we're trying to do. And of course, you're going to be clumsy in some way and you won't be perfect at it. But the effort is a signal that I value what you value. What you care about matters to me, right? In a way that I want to be simpatico here on this. I want to be on your team to accomplish your goals. And I think that's the whole purpose of this series is to invite you into the idea that you could impact that room, but the way to do it is to understand it and to engage it fearlessly and with curiosity and openness and confidence. All right, before we jump back to part 2 here, I want to give you another little quick plug to my sponsors, FinalLoop and WayFlyer. So Leo and the team set me up with a demo account. Look at my business, Hot Peppers. I want to give you a little glimpse inside of FinalLoop and what I think makes it so cool. So this is the inside of the dashboard of FinalLoop. You're going to see a home base where, as an entrepreneur, one of the things that I believe is that you need to anchor yourself in looking at information in this sequence, starting with the cash, moving to the profit, and then looking at marketing metrics. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs are sort of trained to look the other way. So I love that home base puts cash flow right in front of your face, brings your bank balances into the front and center, gives you real-time access to a P&L. So you're never slacking and going, hey, where is that? Could you send me a PDF? Could you give me an export? You've got your balance sheet. You got your cash flow statement. You have it all right in front of you. And if you begin to make this the primary tab in your dashboard, I promise it's going to transform your business. Real-time reconciliation. It's going to get you the best financial information you need to make decisions as quick as possible. So more to come on going through features and benefits here, but wanted to give you a little sneak peek into Hot Peppers and the inside of FinalLoop. And then finally, look at this homepage. I just love this. Accelerate your growth with fast, unsecured funding. Again, what's transforming my opinion in this moment where there is a lot of strain in the marketplace and the access to capital is challenging is that the worst thing an entrepreneur can do for their life is put themselves personally on the hook for money that threatens their home, their general well-being, and accelerates stress to level 1,000. So sometimes paying for unsecured debt is a better path. Now, we're going to have features coming in the future where we're going to talk about how to analyze that and its impact on your specific business. But thank you to WayFlyer for continuing to find ways to fund into our industry with a genuine pursuit of providing entrepreneurs fast, unsecured funding. Now, back to part 2.
And from the other side of the bridge, the same thing goes for CFOs who are listening. I'm working with a really talented CMO who I get the benefit of watching put together some really effective tactics. The reporting analysis is not the strong suit though. So I'm needing to go and dig a little bit further than I normally would in order to understand the viability financially of the strategy that's being put out there. And we're meeting in the middle. And it's changed the direction of the business for the better. And so I see that as both sides need to come together and sometimes need to meet in the middle of the bridge.
I think
but if
this
we're
all
both
the time.
making the effort to get to the other side, if I can add, we're both making the effort to get to the other side, we'll likely meet in the middle and have a much stronger product.
It's right. And as CEO, like I think about this in agency world, the classic dichotomy or challenge is sales and service, right? They both want different things. Sales wants to be able to promise the world. Service wants to underpromise. They're in constant tension. And my job as the CEO is to build relationship and shared incentive amongst that group of people in a way that forces them into conversation with each other, that forces them into a shared set of goals around what's best for the organization. And I think this is so often the case is that the CEOs, the relationship between your marketing leader and your finance leader is yours to cultivate. It's yours to ensure that they value each other, they care about each other, that there's trust there, there's shared language, all those things. So one of the ways that I think we talked about this, Mark, before we got to this was the idea of what does everybody look at and what is this actual bar? What practically is a financial plan? Like at the end of it, what do I have to look at and how do I know that it exists? So let's talk about a little bit about that and how I have a vision for maybe unifying some of these separate boxes in the beginning and bringing people closer to that financial.
Absolutely. So simply put, the financial plan from a CFO perspective, it has to result in a 3-statement forecast. And what does that mean? P&L, balance sheet, cash flow statement. And it should be simplified so that it's easily communicable to the right parties within the organization. And the proper complexity should be given to those who need that level of complexity. So it's essentially, it needs to be fit for purpose in the way you communicate it. That's what I'm trying to say here. It needs to be fit for the right purpose. And how do you know it's done is a really good question. Because, I've heard many different musical artists talk about trying to decide when an album is finished. And it's a really hard thing to decide. It's a gray area. You don't know for sure. But ultimately, you set a couple iterations. You have to come to a gut level agreement based off of the data that this plan is achievable and it's a goal that we want to set before the organization. And then you stamp it. And it's really done when the owner says it's done. The ownership group, and those who are the stakeholders.
And there's two things that we should distinguish here at this point. I think it's a good point to do it, which is the difference between in this process, which we're describing as an annual budgeting process.
Yeah.
Which is the sake of building one plan that is anchored in stone that does not change throughout the year. And that is a really important process. And I watch so many businesses to have like 7,000 versions of a plan that never was anchored. And what it does is it robs you of the opportunity to reflect on what you were wrong about. And I think that's it's actually a gift to utilize well. And so this process is about creating the annual budget, about creating a one-time anchored reality. But there's also another version of this, which we would refer to as the forecast, which is in many big organizations, I've seen this referred to as the LE, the latest estimate, or a forecast that's done on a monthly rhythm, where every month we're reconciling for ourselves what was true, what did we miss, and what do we believe is going to occur in a smaller window. So maybe talk a little bit about that process and how you see it being distinct from the annual.
So what you saw was sort of a data flow and a roll-up, right? This is more about the iterative nature of the process and how things go round and round. So the budget on an annual level looks like this. These are all the key components, the different plans wrapping around the center, which is supported by reporting. So they all are speaking to one another, right? Now, that's done annually. Some things like capacity, hiring, inventory systems, etc., that's not done every month. And so here is what I'm often seeing, a simplified, effective version for the e-commerce brand. And it's just these three components: marketing, inventory, finance. We tweak the capacity if we need to. If we're selling a lot more, of course, we'll change these things. But these are chunkier things: capacity, people, G&A. Marketing, inventory, finance is very fluid, very real time. And so this is reviewed every month. And so just to reiterate, budget, annual, forecast, monthly, actuals compared to forecast and budget tell you how we're doing versus our goals on the year. Budget versus forecast tell you how we're doing versus our expectation.
That's great. We have two processes. One is, I'll describe it at my own companies at CTC. We have what we call Sandbox review, which is my expectation for my finance team is that we close the books by the 8th of every month. So we have a meeting where we reflect on the previous month. You know, you're smiling. Our business is not the most complicated in the world. It's pretty straightforward. So it's doable. It's a reasonable expectation. So we try and close the books by the 8th so we can look back and say, where were we wrong? Where were we right? What do we learn about that? And then we use that to reinform that we start to build the next month's forecast. Okay. Because we will have completed the month that we're in. We won't be doing it then. We look out to the coming month. So right now, we're going to be doing this in a week for March. That will be about the April plan. And we're getting that right. So that's a rhythm inside of my agency. At CTC, usually it's the last Tuesday or Wednesday is our last client meeting before the start of a new month. We come to that meeting with a full marketing calendar for the coming month, the latest expectation of revenue all the way down to contribution margin on a daily level. And in that meeting, we review the marketing calendar. Are these all the initiatives? Are they all scheduled to go live on the same date? Are all the email sends ready to go? And we check in on inventory. Do we have the inventory? Here's the media plan. Here's what we're going to be spending on. Is there inventory in position for all of these allocated dollars? Does the demand creation plan match the existing inventory position? Is there anything that's ahead of stock or out of stock? Okay, cool. We're ready to go. Then we take those numbers and we lock them in Statless. So then we have a version of a monthly locked number that doesn't change. And that allows us to every day see performance to expectation in a narrow window. Because just like performance to expectation on the annual basis is all about helping you learn where you're wrong and course correct, the same is true on a narrower window. where seeing daily where we're off course allows us to see what adjustments we need to make and course correct quicker. And so I like to say that forecasting is an exercise in execution as much as it is in modeling, where you have to see how quickly you're off course and get back on course, off course, on course, off course, on course. And to do that, you need that latest expectation.
Absolutely. And something that's coming to mind, and I don't know if the listeners into this are maybe feeling this can be overwhelming and very complicated. And the question might come up that, well, I'm not yet a 8-figure business, or I'm not yet at a stage where I've got enough resources, enough personnel to do this full process. And I would say there is a simplified version of this that works at different stages of growth. It isn't an excuse to not have a plan. To me, it's most important that you go through the process of planning. I'm not going to quote the old adage about planning being more important than the plan itself, but going through that process is important in itself, no matter the stage that you're at. And so the way that the process takes shape at a smaller size is you end up with less chunky events and more fluidity. And so that means that you have a simpler plan. You're not carrying a bunch of staff. You're not buying a bunch of equipment because you can't afford it yet. But you are certainly doing marketing. You have a marketing funnel. You have your inventory production conveyor belt, and you have your finance engine. And these things we have to have a plan around.
That's right. And I think that for those, let's say in the 7-figure range, I think you should go through the exercise of building an annual budget. That might feel frivolous because you're like, the growth rate, I don't know. But again, it is an exercise in learning and reflection. So build an annual budget. You should be doing a monthly forecast. I think that is, maybe you're not at the daily level at this point, but maybe it's a monthly forecast for you across a couple of key metrics. And then eventually you want to get to this place where you have all of this synced together in a way that's actualizing and updating in real time. And that's a lot about, I'm going to grab the screen real fast, Mark, if I can. Please. To just say like what we think. And one of the things that I am advocating for, and that Mark and I are working to with Carnivore and other people, is that I think the financial plan should actually be home base for the business for everyone. And versus the BI tool or the marketing tool as right now where most of the organization lives every day. And what I mean by that is that there should be a modified version of the P&L. And you can go back to episode 1 to see what we would look at as a rolled up view of the P&L into what we call 4-quarter accounting that gives you with some key operating metrics that you can see. And at CTC, we build these in a way that they are updated in real time. They're connected to a database, so you can see every day where you're at relative to expectation. And then we decompose this into a daily view of performance to expectation across key marketing metrics. But every one of these inputs ladders up in real time to this business output so that you know that if you are on course here, you're on course here, right? And I think that is where ultimately the most powerful thing is that ideally everyone in the business is home for are we winning or losing is as close to the financial document that the enterprise value would be assessed at. Like where the actual value of the business is being assessed should be the place that as many people as possible are assessing the business. And I think that's one of my big ambitions here is to move out of a bunch of whether it's triple whale or statless or anything else into how many people can we bring into an understanding of the impact we're making on the financial objective of the business.
You said that people will be focused on what actually drives enterprise value. That's generally back to the owner objectives. That's generally the owner objective is to build something of worth and value that they can extract that value from at some point in time, whether that be on an ongoing basis and you keep it forever to build a legacy business, or that you sell it and exit. But if we're all looking at different optimization points that aren't towards the objectives of the owner, then we're going to end up in different places, rowing in different directions, having tension within the teams and not delivering the financial results.
And I want to just acknowledge at this moment that the idea of this is vulnerable. It's a view into the actuality of what's happening inside of the business, but it's the truest truth about your business. And it's the thing you actually care about improving. And so what I would encourage you to do is to reject the idea that it's too complex for people to understand. I promise you, trying to sort out attribution is more complex than reading a P&L, right? Mark, that's your line. You gave me that earlier.
Yeah.
Invite people into this space. Have them affect the thing that you actually care about, the money in your bank account, the actual enterprise value of your company. That shows up in a P&L, not in a dashboard. And so invite them into affecting that. And you'll be shocked at people's capacity to be innovative and smart and capable around making your thing better. But you have to invite some people in. And I think in doing so, you offer yourself a world of opportunity to really affect the thing you care about.
Mm-hmm. And just to add some meat on the bones of what that looks like, you don't have to communicate your distributions to yourself, to every employee that you have, or to every contractor, or every agency, but giving useful, practical, for instance, contribution margin to the marketer, giving that information is really, really helpful in aligning. And just to speak to your point about vulnerability, I've often, as a CFO, walking into owner-operated businesses, I've often sensed that vulnerability firsthand. I mean, it's almost every time. It's like opening the kimono, is what I've heard it said. To be like, it's really bearing all in front of someone else. And oftentimes, founders and owners haven't even told their partner or spouse about what's going on financially within the business. So it can be intimidating. But getting through that psychological hurdle will allow the business objectives and the likelihood to achieve them to grow dramatically. And it's a huge wall I often see.
I'm in a weird little fitness community called Men and Women of Discomfort. And it's a cool group of people that are trying to, meet different fitness goals in different periods of times. And one of the things that you do in the process is you weigh yourself weekly and you share it with the group. And what I watch people do in the beginning of this process is they stand on a scale for the very first time and they deal with a signpost of reality that they've been avoiding and hiding from. And the number often surprises themselves. And in that initial moment, there's fear, insecurity, vulnerability. But suddenly what they've done is they've claimed back authority over what is presently actually true and now have a chance to change it. And when we at CTC walk inside of people's businesses and they give us their P&L and it's a mess, I know, like I have built a data room and let people look at my business, and I know I feel a temptation to lie. I want to figure out how I can make it look better. It is such a judgment on me, and my identity is so inextricably linked to this thing that I know how that feels. But I'm telling you, in that space, whether it's the scale number or the P&L, you've now created the possibility to change it. And you've created the opportunity to impact it in a positive way. And so I think whether that's your executives in marketing and finance and these other places, the destruction of these silos is for the sake of the improvement of your business. And I'm going to keep fighting for it. And I know Mark is too. So Mark, I appreciate the dialogue.
Absolutely. And there's an example I'd like to give. I mean, I was working with what it might look like to be hiding slightly from your finances. This is just maybe a flag to look out for. I was working with a company that was growing in sales and was feeling the inability to make distributions, and ultimately wasn't able to pay themselves the same amount and wasn't sure why, and saw that the marketing efficiency, roughly speaking, was maybe the same as it was before, and made a decision to cut marketing. And in that process, found the sales decreased, but wasn't looking at the right numbers. And so the contribution margin decreased dramatically. It didn't gain the efficiency. What also happened was cash in the bank went down. And so over time, this person stopped paying bills. I started accruing a larger accounts payable account over time and kept the bank balance within a comfortable buffer to feel good at night, but knew that there was something under the surface going wrong. And what it took to address that was to call somebody like me. But I'm saying that, not to go against my own services, but you can do that yourself through self-education and going into the places that you're not certain about, or you can call somebody to help you out with that.
Yeah, it's just so real. And I appreciate you, Mark. I appreciate all the dialogue that we have. We're hopefully going to be working on something cool together in a way that's going to invite more marketers and CFOs to understand this conversation in learning capacity, as well as what does it look like for CTC to bring a service to the market in partnership with some CFOs and some awesome partners like FinalLoop and WayFlyer and the other people that we care about that are doing this work alongside us. So we appreciate the dialogue, man. Thanks for coming over from the other side of the bridge and being willing to chat with me, and looking forward to continuing to work together.